Welcome everyone to our ongoing series of classes on the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach, the 7 universal divine laws. We are currently studying the section in the book known as the Tanya, written by the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitch Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Schneur Zalman of Liadi. In the Tanya, there's a section called Shaar HaYichud Veha Emunah, the gate of unity and faith. We are in the middle of chapter 7, and the Alter Rebbe is explaining in great detail the relationship that we have with God. And he's going through, the Alter Rebbe is explaining how anything can exist other than God. Because in essence, nothing else exists other than God. And there are 12 chapters in total, and we are in the middle of chapter 7. At this point, we're up to page Pei Gimel Amud Aleph. For those that are following in the original, in the Hebrew, in the regular printed version of the Tanya, that would be 83a. Otherwise, that would be page 165 in the Tanya. At the bottom of the page, the last 4 lines. At this point, the Alter Rebbe introduced a concept of tzimtzum, the godly contraction. And based on the Rambam Maimonides, the Alter Rebbe explains that unlike anyone else, God is different, for his knowledge is one with his essence. And therefore, we cannot truly understand that. It's impossible for a human being to grasp that, because that's not how our minds work, and that's not how we work. And Alter Rebbe said that this is not only Maimonides' approach, but it's the same way according to Jewish mysticism, according to Kabbalah. And therefore, in essence, all there is absolute oneness of God, because all of existence is from his knowledge, and not vice versa, as we explained at length in our previous class. When it comes to us and our relationship to information, using the tool called our brain, our mind, so there is the concept, there is the information, and then there is us, and then there's the process of us computing that in our minds. And we have the ability to understand things. In the case of God and information and reality, it's actually quite the opposite. Anything and everything which exists, any concept, any spiritual entity, any physical entity, anything and everything that exists on any level, exists because God knows it to be so. Not that God knows everything, obviously. But everything is not only known by God, but it is because God knows it to be so. And ultimately, we can't understand what that means. Ultimately, that's beyond our rationale and the type of thinking. And that's what the verse that's quoted says. My ways are not your ways, my thoughts are not your thoughts. And at this point, where we left off last time, Alter Rebbe now is going to explain the correct approach to understanding this concept of tzimtzum, of contraction of the godly light. And he's going to explain the mistake that some very great and very intelligent scholars made. And he's now going to explain how they came to make their mistake. V'hinei, and behold, mikan, from here, yesh lahavin, we can now understand shigegas miktsas chachamim be'eineihem, the mistake of some of the scholars, of the wise men, in their eyes. Hashem yichaper ba'adam, and may God atone for them. In other words, it's a very severe mistake, because we're talking over here about ideology of religion, and these are very, very delicate issues that we're dealing with over here. Existence of God and all of these things. So the fact that they make a mistake, it isn't just a mistake. So the Alter Rebbe, so to say, throws in those three words that may God forgive them, atone for them. It's inadvertent. It's a mistake. They're not doing it on purpose, and their philosophy is wrong by mistake. Shishagu, for they have inadvertently, mistakenly, vita'u, and they made a mistake, bi'iyunam, in their study, in their looking into, b'chisvei ha'arizal, in the writings of the Arizal, the great 16th century Kabbalist, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria of blessed memory. That's the acronym of Arizal, who lived in the city of Tzfas up north in Israel. And he taught Kabbalah, and his main disciple, Rabbi Chaim Vital, recorded his teachings. And thus we now have what's called the writings of the Arizal, which were directly recorded by his disciple, not by him. So these great sages, they studied, they delved into the writings of the Arizal, and this is what led them to misunderstand. Vehevinu inyan hatzimtzum hamuzkar sham kifshutai, and they understood the concept, the idea of tzimtzum, of God contracting his light, which is mentioned over there. They understood it simply, in its simple sense, like literally, and that's not so. What does it say? So we're going to basically quote the words now, and we'll see how they were able to make such a mistake. They came to the conclusion, She'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the Holy One, blessed be He, God Almighty, Silek Atzmoi Umehusoi, has removed, has taken away himself, his essence, Chas v'Shalom, Me'olam Hazeh, God forbid, from this physical world. The Alter Rebbe is adding, of course, those words, Chas v'Shalom, which loosely translates as God forbid. They understood, these great sages, some of them understood, based on the writings of the Arizal, that the concept of tzimtzum means that God, by choice, by divine plan, has made himself absent from this physical world. Rak, just what do they think? The only thing is, shemashgiach milemaila, that he is supervising from above. Bahashkacha pratis, with very particular, specific divine providence on every single detail. Al kol hayitzurim kulam, on all formed entities, on anything and everything which exists, everything. Asher b'shamayim mima'al, which are found in the heavens above, v'al ha'aretz mitochas, and on the earth down here. That's what they believe. So God knows everything. God is observing everything. He is in full control. He is the master of all. He runs the show, if we can say that. Everything. Every single thing. Every detail. Hashkacha pratis. Every blade of grass on the planet. Anything up there, anything down here. Everything is by divine plan and by divine supervision. But is God actually here in this physical world? They say, no. He's from above. V'hinei, now says the Alter Rebbe, and behold, milvad, aside for the fact, she'i efshar, that it is impossible, klal, at all, loymar, to say, inyan ha-tzimtzum kifshutoy, to speak about this concept of contracting the divine light in a simple, literal sense. That's impossible to say that. Why? Shehu mimikroi haguf, because that is something which can only take place to a physical body. It could only, that experience, that happening can only happen to something physical. Ala Kadosh Baruch Hu, and we cannot attribute any physical happenings to the Holy One, blessed be He. Hanivdol mehem, for He is separated from these types of happenings, of experiences. Riboy revavis havdolois, myriads and myriads of separations can't be ad ein kates, till literally without end, infinitely. So to say anything physical about God has to be taken metaphorically. Can't be. For instance, when the verse in the Bible, in the Torah, uses a term, the hand of God. God took the Jews out of Egypt, outstretched hand, outstretched arm. Or it says, the eyes of God. The eyes of God are upon the land. Any of these expressions cannot be, God forbid, taken literally. God doesn't have a physical hand. Of course it's true, but it's true not the way we understand it in a physical sense. The Torah is speaking in our language so that we can, to some degree, have a relationship and somehow understand and have some inkling as to what it is. So we know what a physical hand is. We know what the function of the hand is. We know what the hand does. So therefore, God uses metaphorically the term hand of God, the eyes of God. And likewise, what it says later on, whether it's in the book of Daniel, describing God with this type of a beard and sitting, and so forth. For that matter, what it says in Midrashim, in the oral tradition. All of these things, written Torah, oral Torah, it's all metaphorically. God does not get angry. God does not get happy. All of these terminologies which happen to human beings, to people in physical bodies, cannot be attributed to God. He's beyond everything. So tzimtzum, to contract oneself, or to contract energy, or to condense energy or power or anything like that. Those are all physical things. So that's number one. That's besides the fact, says Alter Rebbe, besides that you can't say what they say about tzimtzum for that reason. Af gam zois. Fifth line on page Pei Gimel Amud Beis, or 166. Af gam zois. Also, loy bedas yedaberu. They're not speaking with intelligence. Me'achar shehei ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. For these sages, which are making this very grave mistake in understanding tzimtzum in the literal sense, they are, after all, believers, the sons of believers. What are they believers? That their parents and grandparents believe. Shakadosh Baruch Hu Yodea Kol HaYitzurim, that God knows all created entities, everything that exists. Sheboilam Hazeh HaShafel, in this lowly physical world. Umashkiach Aleihem, and He supervises them. Ve'al Karchach, and we must say, logically, we have to say, Ein Yidiyasei Oisam Moisifa Boi Ribui V'chidush. His knowledge of them, his knowing what goes on in this world, that knowledge that God has, does not add anything to him. There's nothing new, no novelty. For as we said, he knows everything by knowing himself. There's nothing outside of him. He doesn't know what's going on in this world and there, because if he would, then that would make him have more knowledge. He knows what goes on in this world because he knows himself, he knows his essence. For as it were, his very essence, his core essence, and his knowledge is absolutely one, unlike the way it is by us, as we said. So it's impossible to take the concept of tzimtzum in its face value sense, because that then would mean that God has reduced himself in some way, shape, or form. And therefore that would mean that things add to him. When a person finds out more information, that broadens their understanding, or that gives them more understanding. That makes them now more than they were before. We cannot say that about God. So it makes no sense to understand tzimtzum in the literal sense. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to bring down as proof, textual proof, from the Zohar, the primary work of Kabbalah, of the esoteric part of the Torah. And this we should obviously take literally. And it's not a contradiction to the teachings of the Arizal. V'zeu shekosuv b'tikunim. And this is what is written in the section of the Zohar called the Tikunim. Tikun Nun Zayin, Tikun number 57. And the Alter Rebbe quotes, and it's in Aramaic, he's quoting it straight from the Zohar, from the Tikunei Zohar. The leis asar, there is no place, ponui minei, that is void of him. Loi be'iloyin, not in the upper realms, not on top up there. V'loi besatoin, and not in the lower realms. No matter how high you go, no matter how low you go, God is everywhere. In the same way. No place is void of his presence. Uveraya mehemna parshas Pinchas, and in another section in the Zohar called the Raya Mehemna, in the section on the weekly Torah portion of Pinchas, it says, and we quote, Ihu He, God, Tofis Bechula, is grasped in all. He has it all. V'leis man de Tofis Bei, but no one can grasp him. Chulu, etc. Ihu, he, Soivid Kol Almin, Chulu. He encompasses all worlds. He includes and incorporates and has in him everything. V'leis man de Nofik Mirashusei Lebar, and no one goes out of his domain. No one is outside of him. Ihu Mimali Kol Almin Chulu. He fills all worlds. Now these words, these lines, these terms of soivev kol almin, all encompassing, and mimale kol almin, all and filling, become very paramount in Chassidus. And there are volumes and volumes of discourses explaining these terms. But this is the source for these terms, the Zohar. So he fills all worlds. Iu mekasher umeyached zino lezinei. He binds and unites everything with himself. Ila v'sata, the upper and the lower. V'leis kurva bedalad yesoidin, and there's nothing in all the four elements, meaning fire, air, water, and earth. Ela bekucha brichu, only in God. Kad iu beinayu, only when He is amongst them. If you remove God from the equation, you have absolutely, literally nothing. Not that it's not alive, not that it's not functioning, not that it doesn't have vitality, not that it's dead. It isn't. And that's just using our terms. It's even more negated than that. So to say, scientifically, it's not like, well, we have all this, and then guess what? We also have, or we primarily have, God, who makes it all tick. You're missing it. If you remove God from the equation, there is no equation. The whole equation, every detail, in the most general terms and in the most particular and specific terms, everything is in God. Ad kan l'shoinoi. Up to here is the quote from the Zohar, word for word. Now the Alter Rebbe is going to go on to explain this piece of Zohar, this very fundamental piece of Zohar that we just read, that he just quoted. But the point is quite clear. Before we even learn the Alter Rebbe's explanation, take the Zohar literally. And the Alter Rebbe is basically saying, don't misunderstand and misconstrue the writings, the teachings of the Arizal. The Arizal, God forbid, he never meant tzimtzum in the literal sense. Tzimtzum in the straightforward, simple sense. Can't be. And those that understand it that way are making a terrible mistake. I don't want to elaborate. I want to actually read the Alter Rebbe's words inside, his explanation, and let's translate and see what he says. But just very briefly before we go on to that, to try to bring, so to say, both sides to visualize or to try to get an understanding. Just for a moment, to, so to say, play devil's advocate. Without really trying to build up their case and explain their mistaken approach. But let's suffice by giving the following example or illustration. And this is my point, so pardon me for sounding so coarse and lowly, but that's exactly the point. A very, very disgusting dirty, terrible, 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 disgusting, stinky toilet under terrible conditions that hasn't been cleaned for a long time, and a lot of all sorts of manure is accumulating over there, and it's just unbearable. You're going to say that God is present there? God is there? Are you crazy? God is in the temple. God is in the sanctuary. God is in the synagogue. God is where you let him in. God is in a clean place. God is in a holy place. God is in your home. God is in your heart. But in that hole? Or how about in a place of disgusting, terrible, terrible sin? God is there? How about in a place of idolatry, where all sorts of things which deny he's there? How could that be? You're not, by Jewish law, one is not permitted to say a benediction in the bathroom. One is not supposed to even think holy thoughts in the bathroom, in the toilet room. There's laws governing that. If a Jew wants to pray, he can't pray in a room where there's a toilet, an outhouse. So you see, that might be sort of their argument. I mean, obviously there's a lot of philosophy to it, but I'm just trying to illustrate it in a very coarse way. And what does the Alter Rebbe say to that? Well, it may sound uncomfortable, but put away your emotions for a moment and strictly intellectually, yes, God is everywhere. In the dung, in the manure, in the unbearably smelly, disgusting place. Because guess what? It's not that God is everywhere. Anything which exists is God. There's nothing outside of him. The reason there can exist manure is because God knows it's there. Therefore it's there. It's not that it's there and he knows it. It's only there because he knows it, as we keep on saying over and over again and repeating that we can't really understand that. So there's no such thing as a place which is void of God. It doesn't matter if it's the most corrupt place, the most disgusting place, the most sinful place. In essence, God is as much there as he is in the Holy of Holies, not only in this world, but in the highest spiritual realms that you'll study about in mysticism, in Kabbalah. It has to be that way, as we just quoted from the Zohar. Everything is within him. And he connects everything. And he makes it exist. And he is the whole equation. All right. And now let's see the Alter Rebbe's explanation of the Zohar that we just quoted. V'roitze loymar. And what he means to say. Now the Alter Rebbe is going to interpret and explain the quote that we just had from the Zohar. Leis man de tofis bei. What does it mean that no one grasps him? He grasps all and no one grasps him. What does that mean? She'ein mi sheyitvois basogas sichloi. For there doesn't exist, there isn't anyone that can grasp with their intellect, with their mind, mikol sichlim ha'elyonim, from all of the high lofty intellectuals. We're not only talking about human beings that have a limited brain with such and such an IQ, for example. Even the greatest angels and the supernal beings, no created entity, no matter how smart, can grasp God with their mind. In the essence of the Holy One, blessed be He. As it says in the Zohar, in the Tikkunim, Sisima dechol sisimin. He is the concealed of all concealments. V'leis machshava tfisa bach klal. And no thought, not only human thought, and no thought can grasp you at all. V'gam batachtoinim, and also in the lower realms, in this physical world, af al gav, even though the ihu memali kol almin. Part of the Zohar that we quoted before said soiviv kol almin, that he's all-encompassing, fine. But then part of it said memali kol almin, that he fills all the worlds. That means he is in the world. Even though that is the statement, einoi kinishmas ha'adam toich gufoy. But it's not the same way as the person's soul is inside his body. Don't make the mistake and don't think that God fills space like the soul fills the body. For the spiritual soul is actually contained and grasped in the physical body. To the extent that ultimately the spiritual soul does take on changes, does get affected by things that happen to the physical body. V'tza'aroi, and the pain, the discomfort that the physical body feels, mehakois, from, let's say, being hit, oikrirus, or the climate of cold, oichamimus eish, or the heat of the fire, v'chayoytze, and the like. All of these physical things which have an effect on the physical body. It's too cold, it's too hot, it hurts. All of those physical things do have an effect on the soul, even though the soul is not physical. But because the soul is enclosed within the physical body, it does get affected. Which is absolutely not the case with regards to God. For he does not receive shum shinui, any change whatsoever, from the changes of this world, from summer to winter, and from day to night. That the climate change has absolutely no effect on any level on the Almighty. Kidichsiv, like the verse states, that also darkness is not dark from you. V'layla, and night, kayoim ya'ir, will shine like day. The darkness is not dark for him. It's not dark. Why? Lefi she'einoi nitfas klal toich ha'olamais. Because he is not at all, as the Zohar said, he is not at all grasped, contained within the worlds. Af al gav, even though the memale loin, that he does fill them. So it's a difficult concept for us to relate to, because how can you have it both ways? With God, that is exactly how it is. He does fill all of space. He is everywhere, although he's beyond that. Like we said, the higher level of truth is that everywhere is within him. Not that he is everywhere, but he is also everywhere, and yet not affected by being there. The climate, the darkness, the pain does not affect him. He is beyond it, even though he is there in the full sense. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to continue to explain these two levels of God's relationship and interaction with existence. And again, the key phrases here are soivev kol almin and mimale kol almin. Or in short, soivev and mimale. Soivev means all-encompassing. Mimale means filling. Last line on the page. V'zehu gamkein inyan soivev kol almin. And this is also this theme, this idea of the soivev. Perush. Meaning. Derech mashal. By way of a parable. Kishadam isboinein be'ezet var chochma b'sichloi. Let's say a person, human being, is meditating on a certain intellectual concept. In his mind, in his brain, he's deeply thinking and meditating on a certain concept, an intellectual concept. Oy davar gashmi, or something physical. He's envisioning in his mind, something physical that he sees or saw. B'machshavtoi, in his thought. So the person's using his brain, using his mind to understand or to envision something, a concept, a picture. Azai, so then, sichloi, his intelligence, his brain, umachshavtoi, and his thought process, his ability to think, to compute, makifim al hadover hahu, are encompassing. His mind is containing that which he's thinking. Hametzuyer b'machshavtoi e b'sichloi, which is pictured in his thought or in his brain. But they're not actually encompassing, they're not actually holding that which is in his thought. It's thought. It's not real, it's not tangible. The person saw an amazing sunset. What a beautiful vision. He saw this amazing thing. He's right there on the beach, watching the ocean, and he sees heaven and earth meeting, and he sees the sun setting. He's staring at that for an hour. And the nature, it's just, so amazing. Okay? A year later, he wants to re-envision that beautiful thought that he saw, that beautiful sight. He closes his eyes at any given time, and he really sees that again. That whole scene with the sun, the sky, the clouds, the horizon, the whole thing is in his mind. But is it really? Well, it is visually, it is intellectually, but is it really? Well, what do you mean by really? Physically? Tangibly? Of course not. For that matter, a concept. An intellectual concept. A deep concept. Anything. It's in his mind. It's not really in his head. Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but when we're dealing with God Almighty, Tichsiv Bey, that it says with regards to Him, Ki loy machshavoisechem, the Goymer, the prophet Isaiah, is speaking in the name of God. My thoughts are not your thoughts, says God. In other words, we just explained the thought process. We described a thought of a human being. God says, well, I'm not like that. Machshavtoi v'yidiyasoi, his thought and his knowledge, sheyedeya kol hanivroim, that he knows all of existence, he knows all of the created entities. Makefes kol nivra v'nivra. It actually surrounds and encompasses every single created entity, every detail. B'foyel mamish, in actuality, really. Sharei hi chayusoi, for it is its very life, it's its vitality. V'hisavusoi, and it's forming, it's coming to existence, meyayin liyesh, from absolute nothingness to being a reality, b'foyel mamish, in actuality. Meaning, if the human being chooses not to meditate and think about that beautiful sunset that he saw it a year ago, would it affect the sunset at all? Would it make it any less beautiful, any less amazing, any more amazing? Of course not. It's not more or less amazing depending on how many people observe it and how many people think about it. A certain intellectual concept. Does it make a difference whether I choose to think about it now or not, as far as its reality and its authenticity and its truth? Makes no difference. But in God's case, it only exists because God is actually thinking it. Which means with his thought, he is really and literally encompassing it. Physically as well. So it physically exists because God is thinking it. Now, of course, he is infinite. It's impossible to think so many thoughts. He's beyond time, beyond space, beyond limitation. So he is, to use our terms, thinking every single thought of the existence of every single existence all the time, to use our terms. And that's what makes it exist. That is, very briefly, in just a few lines, the description of Soivev Kol Almin. That is what Soivev means. That is how things exist. By God thinking about them, and therefore they are incorporated in his thought. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to go on and explain the other level of Mimale. Umimale Kol Almin. So to say, in contrast, or what's the other level, the lower level, the way that God fills all worlds? He bechinas achayus, that is the aspect of the godly energy, of the life force, hamislabeshes, which encloses itself, toich etzem hanivra, inside the essence of the created entity, shehi mitzumtzemes besoichoi, that this godly energy is contracted within it, in that limited created entity, b'tzimtzum rav, with a great contraction, kifi erech mehus hanivra, according to the essence of that particular entity, whatever we're talking about. Shubal gvul v'sachlis, because whatever it is, it's limited. It's a created entity. So it's limited, b'kamusoi ve'echusoi, both quantitatively speaking as well as qualitatively speaking. It has limitations. Dehainu, in other words, what do we mean by quantity and quality? Ma'alosoi v'chashivusoi, its importance, its superiority. Kegoin, let's give a physical example of an entity, of a created entity. For example, Hashemesh, the sun. The sun's out there that we benefit from. The sun. Shegufoi, its physical body, yesh lo gvul v'tachlis v'kamusoi. It has a limit in its quantity. Shehu, that it is, kimoi, approximately, kuf samech zayin pe'amim, 167 times kegoydel kadur haaretz. greater than the size of planet Earth. So that would be called kamus. That would be called quantity. It's got a size. We can measure it. We know how big planet Earth is, and we know how big the sun is. Sun's very big. Not infinite. It's roughly 167 times larger than planet Earth. That's called quantity. And what do we mean by its quality and its superior quality? Hu oiroi. That's its light. The light that emanates from the sun. Gam ken yesh lo gvul. That too has a limit. Ad kama yuchol lahayer. How far can its light go? It can't go eternally. It can't go infinitely without any end. The light coming from the sun has a limit. Ki lo yayer lebilti tachlis. It won't shine without end. Me'achar shehu nivra, because it's a created entity. Anything that's created is limited. So that was one example. V'chein, likewise, kol anivroyim, all created entities, hein balik vul v'sachlis, they are by definition limited. Ki meharetz l'rakia mahalech tak shonachulu. For this is what the Talmud states, and Rabbi is referring to that. From earth to heaven is a distance of 500 years. Whatever that means. 500-year distance. The fact that the sages of the Talmud chose to use a certain terminology, even if it's not physical, but it's a limit. They said 500-year distance. In other words, it's limited. It may be very, very great. It may be a tremendous distance, but it's limited. The imkain, if so, now that we've established that everything has got to be limited, even the sun, even the distance from here to heaven, everything has to be limited. If so, hachayus hamlubeshes bohem, the godly life force that's enclosed in them, in every created entity, in the sun and whatever, he bevchinas tzimtzum rav. That means it's very contracted. V'otzum, tremendous, intensely contracted. Ki tzrichot chilolis tzamtzem, because it first needs to become contracted. Tzimtzumim rabim v'atzumim, many and intense tzimtzumim. Two terms the Alter Rebbe is using. Quantity and quality. It's got to go through many and intense contractions. Until sheisave mikoicha v'oira, that will be created, will come into existence from its strength and from its godly energy, from its light. Etzem anivrayim, the very essence of the created entities. Kamois shehem, as they are, balik vul v'tachlis, limited. See, because the trick over here is or the, so to say, paradox is the totally beyond limitation, infinite God is creating something. So, logically, everything should also be infinite. If God's the creator, so whatever he creates should really be infinite. And now we're saying that he creates and everything is truly finite. Even those things which seem to be really big. And from our perspective, they may be like infinite, but they're not. So how does that work? So that's why God has to take this godly energy, this godly light that he's using, and really, really contract it. Tremendously contracted. Not just, well, let's minimize it a little bit. No, there's no little bit. Rabim v'atzumim. Many and very intense. Ki mikor achayus hu ruach piv shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because the source of life, the source of vitality, the source of any and every life is again using our terms, the breath of God's mouth. Hamislabesh, which encloses itself, ba'asara ma'imoros shebatayra, in the 10 statements, in the 10 utterances which are written in the Torah. In Genesis, right at the beginning of creation, Genesis 1, Bereshis, where it says, and God said, let there be. And God said, let there be. All of those are the chayus, the vitality, the godly energy, how it contracts itself, how it's being contracted, and places itself, sorry about that, and places itself into these words, these utterances. V'ruach piv yisparech. Now the breath of God's mouth could have, if this would be his will, it could have extended literally infinitely. And God could have created worlds literally infinite, quantitatively speaking and qualitatively speaking. And he could have given them eternal, but really eternal life for all eternity, forever and ever and ever and ever. And then this world would have never come to exist. The only reason the physical world is here is because all these spiritual created entities are going through one contraction, another contraction, and less and less and more contracted and more contracted. If God wanted, he could have created infinity, and all the worlds would be, and the sun, that's a joke. And the light of the sun, that's a joke. But since God wants to get to this world, and that's the purpose of all of creation, is this physical world, therefore, he made tzimtzum, real intense contractions. And therefore, the system that he made is that all created entities are limited, quantitatively speaking as well as qualitatively speaking. It's not a perfect place to stop, but at least there's a marker here, so to say. There's the beginning of the parentheses. And I think next time we are going to have to just go back a little bit. I don't want to be too repetitive, especially since our classes are being recorded. For now, we're going to stop at this point. And just to briefly summarize, we spoke about soivev and mimale, the two levels with which God creates and exists within creation. The soivev is how everything only exists because it's included in God's thought. He thinks of it and it is. The mimale is the life, the energy, the godly force which is coming through contractions in order to make everything limited. And this is all, again, in the general thing that we're talking about over here of tzimtzum, not to be taken literally, what does it mean, and so forth. In other words, the Alter Rebbe is putting out the whole picture, laying it all out, so that no one makes the same mistake that other great people unfortunately did make. And if I may, just to make sure, for the record, so to say, we didn't get to the finish yet, but at this point, I want to conclude this class with saying the following statement. It's well known, especially within Hasidus. Tzimtzum is shaloi kifshutoi, which means the whole idea of the contraction is not in the simple sense. To say tzimtzum is kipshutoi, God forbid, I don't want to be too sharp, is very incorrect. It's a big mistake. So until next time, wishing everyone much success in studying and observing and promoting and keeping the 7 universal commandments, divine, godly given, Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach, for all of mankind. Study about God, worship God and God alone, pray to God, and let's all pray that we merit very speedily to have the fulfillment of the purpose of creation realized with the complete and total revelation of our righteous Moshiach now. Thank you.